Okay, I want to talk about Ozymandias because Greek scholar Diodorus Siculus has some very interesting things to say about him. Now, first of all, the title Ozymandias was a sonnet written by English Romantic poet Percy Bysshe Shelley, and it was first published on January 11th, 1818, in the Examiner in London. Now, in antiquity, Ozymandias was a Greek name for the Egyptian pharaoh Ramesses II, who I'm showing you a statue of him. Now, Shelley began to write his poem in 1817, soon after the announcement of the British Museum's acquisition of a large fragment of a statue of Ramesses II from the 13th century BC, and leading some scholars to say that Shelley was inspired by this. So let's talk about the pharaoh Ramesses II. Okay, Ramesses II came after the Hyksos, if I recall correctly on this timeline, were kicked out of Egypt. Okay, so Ramesses II was also known as Ramesses the Great. And as I said, he came after the Hyksos were kicked out by Pharaoh Amos from that 18th dynasty, and Ramesses was the 19th dynasty. It's interesting because in Hollywood films, Ramesses is shown as the pharaoh kicking out the Jews, running out the Jews or the Hyksos, when it really was not. He came in the next dynasty after, but he kicked a lot of people out of Egypt and reestablished its dynasty and its strength. His successors called him the Great Ancestor, and he reasserted Egyptian control over Canaan, and also kicked out the Nubians and did a lot of expeditions there. His father was Seti the First, and it's believed he took the throne over in his late teens. Some believe he lived to 90 or 91. And he's definitely, one of the more famous and more powerful pharaohs. And I'm showing you some pictures of him kicking out the Hittites, kicking out the Nubians. And like I said, did a lot of different things and had a lot of monuments built to him, but and also there's Nefertari. That was one of his important consorts, and she's shown, I believe, in that film with Charlton Heston, and as the alleged consort of the pharaoh that kicked out the Jews out of Egypt, but that's just wrong timeline-wise because the Hyksos were kicked out, and that is the Jews, quite a bit beforehand. So now, what is interesting to me in this Diodorus Siculus's Library of History is a passage of what he built. And I'm going to read to you from the Library of History, Diodorus Siculus, Volume 1, starting on page 167. And it's interesting because it talks about a library, it talks about statues to Zeus and other gods that he built. And this is way before the Romans came in and the Greeks came in. So what is going on? And it's pretty much what I told you with my mythological unification theory. It's all the same people. Okay, let me read this. 10 stades from the first tombs, he says, in which, according to tradition, are buried the concubines of Zeus, stands a monument of a king known as Ozymandias. At its entrance, there is a pylon constructed of variegated stone, 2 plethra in breadth and 45 cubits high. Passing through this, one enters a rectangular peristyle built of stone, 4 plethra long on each side. It is supported in place of pillars by monolithic figures 16 cubits high, wrought in the ancient manner as to the shape and the entire ceiling, which is 2 fathoms wide, consists of a single stone, which is highly decorated with stars on a blue field. Beyond this peristyle, there is yet another entrance and pylon, in every respect like the one mentioned before, save that it is more richly wrought with every manner of relief. Beside the entrance are 3 statues, each of single block of black stone from Syene, of which one, that is seated, in the largest of any in Egypt, the foot measuring over 7 cubits, while the other 2 at the knee of this, the one on the right and the other on the left, daughter and mother respectively, are smaller than the one first mentioned. And it is not merely for its size that this work merits approbation, but it is also marvelous by reason of its artistic quality and excellence because of the nature of the stone, since in a block of so great a size there is not a single crack or blemish to be seen. The inscription upon it runs, "King of kings am I, Ozymandias. If anyone would know how great I am and where I lie, let him surpass one of my works." End quote. There is also another statue of his mother standing alone, a monolith 20 cubits high, and it has 3 diadems on its head, signifying that she was daughter and wife and mother of a king. Beyond the pylon, he says, there is a peristyle more remarkable than the former one. In it, there are all manner of reliefs depicting the war which the king waged against those Bactrians who had revolted against these. He had made campaign with 400,000 foot soldiers and 20,000 cavalry, the whole army having been divided into 4 divisions, all of which were under the command of sons of the king. On the first wall, the king, he says, is represented in the act of besieging a walled city, which is surrounded by a river, and of leading the attack against opposing troops. He is accompanied by a lion, which is aiding him with terrifying effect. Of those who have explained the scene, some have said that in very truth a tame lion, which the king kept, accompanied him in the perils of battle and put the enemy to rout by his fierce onset. But others have maintained that the king, who was exceedingly brave and desirous of praising himself in a vulgar way, was trying to portray his own bold spirit in the figure of the lion. On the second wall, he adds, are wrought the captives as they are being led away by the king. They are without their privates and their hands, which apparently signifies that they were effeminate in spirit and had no hands when it came to the dread business of warfare. The third wall carries every manner of relief and excellent paintings, which portray the king performing a sacrifice of oxen and celebrating a triumph under the war. In the center of the peristyle, there had been constructed of the most beautiful stone an altar, open to the sky, both excellent in its workmanship and marvelous because of its size. By the last wall are 2 monolithic seated statues, 27 cubits high, besides which are set 3 entrances from the peristyle, and by way of the entrance one comes into a hall whose roof was supported by pillars, constructed in the style of an odium, and measuring 2 plethra on each side. In the hall there are many wooden statues representing parties in litigation, whose eyes are fixed upon the judges who decided their cases, and these in turn are shown in relief on one of the walls to the number of the Chief Justice, with a figure of truth hanging from his neck, and holding his eyes closed, and at his side a great number of books. And these figures show by their attitude that the judges shall receive no gift, and that the Chief Justice shall have his eyes upon the truth alone. Next to these courts, he says, is an ambulatory crowded with buildings of every kind, in which there are representations of the foods that are sweetest to the taste of every variety. Here are to be found reliefs of which the king, adorned in colors, is represented as offering to the god the gold and silver which he received each year from the silver and gold mines of all Egypt. And an inspiration below gives also the total amount, which summed up according to its value in silver, it's 32 million minas. Okay, now I'm going to stop for a minute. This is the most interesting part. Now listen, here we go. Page 173. Next comes the sacred library, which bears the inscription, Healing Place of the Soul, and contiguous to the building are statues of all the gods of Egypt, to each of whom the king, in like manner, makes the offering appropriate to him, as though he were submitting proof before Osiris and his successors in the underworld that to the end of days he had lived a life of piety and justice towards both men and gods. Next to the library and separated from it to be a party wall is an exquisitely constructed hall which contains a table with couches for 20 and statues of Zeus and Hera, as well as of the king. Here, it would seem, the body of the king is also buried. In a circle about this building are many chambers which contain excellent paintings of all the animals which are held sacred in Egypt. There is an ascent leading through these chambers to the tomb as a whole. At the top of this ascent, there is a circular border of gold crowning the monument, 365 cubits in circumference and 1 cubit thick. Upon this, the day of the year are inscribed, and one in each cubit of length, and by each day, the risings and settings of the stars as nature ordains them, and the signs indicating the effects which the Egyptian astrologers hold that they produce. This border, they say, had been plundered by Cambyses and the Persians when he conquered Egypt. Such, they say, was the tomb of Ozymandias, the king, which is considered far to have excelled all others, not only in the amount of money lavished upon it, but also in the ingenuity shown by the artificers. Okay, I'm going to stop. So where is this library? Where are the statues of Zeus and Hera that were in this king's tomb? Ramesses II, that Diodorus Siculus says. Why hasn't this been brought out to the public? I have showed you pictures that I got from Wikipedia, and one of them says it was a picture of Ramesses against the Nubians at the Oriental Institute. And it says this photo is from Ramesses II's temple of Biet el Wali in northern Nubia. And I showed you another picture of him going against the Hittites, and that was from one of his temples in Thebes. So where is all of this, and what is in that library? Has it been found? Are they hiding it? Did someone pillage it? What was in that library? And where are the statues of Zeus and Hera, which would be out of place for that time period in Egypt? And why would he have that in his tomb if it was not the same gods and goddesses as I've told you in my mythological unification theory. So that was from Diodorus Siculus's Library of History. And what a mystery. What happened to that library? Where are those statues? And all of this that's described in these pictures and these consorts of Zeus. So, and I'll even try and go back and see if there's anything else. But it just says, I'll go back before I read this. Not only do the priests of Egypt give these facts from their records, but many also of the Greeks who visited Thebes in the time of Ptolemy, son of Lagus, and composed histories of Egypt, one of whom was Hecataeus, agree with what we have said. So 10 stades from the first tombs, he says, in which, according to tradition, are buried the concubines of Zeus, stands a monument of the king known as Ozymandias. Okay, so if anybody knows anything else about it, leave a comment. Very interesting indeed. Thank you.